All right, here we want to review factoring by grouping. Okay, so the way we're going to factor by grouping, I know that I'll probably want to do this if I have 4 terms. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms together. Once I do that, I'm going to factor out the GCF. Remember, the GCF is going to be that greatest common factor. Greatest common factor basically means what is the biggest thing that I can divide out? It can be a number, it can be a variable, it can be a number and a variable. That variable can have exponents, who knows? Okay, so I've got the greatest common factor there, just in case you forgot what GCF is talking about. Okay, so I'm going to find the GCF of each of those 2 groups. And then after I've done that, I'm going to find the match and the leftovers. So at first you're like, what is she talking about? So I'll show you and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense here. Okay, so let's follow our steps. We're going to group the first 2 terms together. And then we're going to group the last 2 terms together. So I need to find the GCF of my first 2 terms. Okay, so I look at my 5x cubed and my 10x squared. So they can both have a factor of 5x squared. Okay, that's my greatest common factor. So I'm going to now factor that out. Remember, factoring out means I'm basically undistributing, even though that's not really a thing. And it's not a word, so we call it factoring. So if I take 5x cubed and divide it by 5x squared, I'd get just an x. If I take 10x squared and divide it by 5x squared, I'd get 2. All right. So now I've factored out the GCF of my first group. I'm going to do the same thing with my next group. Okay, so looking at my next group, I see a negative 3x and a negative 6. So those can both divide by, or I could factor out a negative 3. If I factor it out or divide it out, negative 3x divided by negative 3 is going to give me x. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is going to give me 2. All right, so now I factored out the GCF in both groups, and it's time to write the factors. Okay, so this is what I was meaning. I'm going to find the match. Okay, so I noticed that I have a matching factors here. The x plus 2 matches in both of my 2 groups. So I'm going to keep that match, x plus 2. And then I'm going to get the leftovers. So 5x squared is left over. And so is my minus 3. All right, let's look at this next example. Following the same steps, I'm going to group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. So looking at my first group, I see I have a 12x squared and negative 2x. Those can both divide by 2, so I'm going to have 2. They can also both divide by x, so I'll have a 2x on the outside, leaving me with 12x squared divided by 2x is 6x. Negative 2x divided by 2x is going to be minus 1. All right. Now I'm going to look at the next group. I'm like, 6x and a minus 1, they don't have anything in common. So all that means is there's nothing to bring out. So I should only have a 1, right? 1 means I use itself. I don't have anything else in common. So I'll have 6x minus 1. And the reason is also because, remember, the whole idea is that I want to have something that matches, and they already match. So I just put that 1 out there. I'm going to now write my match, which is 6x minus 1. And then I have a 2x and a plus 1 left over. All right. So let's look at our last example. I'm going to group the first 2 terms. I'm going to group the last 2 terms. Looking at that first group, I notice that they don't have any numbers in common, but they do have an x squared in common, which is going to leave me with x minus 1. Looking at the second group, I have a 9 in common. I'm going to bring out that negative. Now remember, when I bring out a negative, it's going to change all of the signs, which is going to leave me with x minus 1. Okay. If I forgot, okay, so let's say for a second that I just kind of forgot what was going on, and I accidentally had this as a 9, and then it would leave me with a negative x plus a 1. And I'm like, wait a second, they don't match. Oh, yeah, because I was supposed to bring out a negative. If I change the signs, now they match. So I can kind of always keep that idea of they have to match in the back of my mind, so that if I accidentally forget to bring out that negative, it'll kind of help me remember that that's what should have happened. Okay. So going back to our problem here, I'm going to take that match that we have, and then I'm going to take what is left over here, and those would be my factors. Remember, my whole goal here is just to factor by grouping. So even if in these scenarios I could continue to factor more, like we could actually in that last example, we're going to stop here. All I want you to concern yourself with right now is just how do I factor by grouping only. All right?